From Edmonton, hi, I'm Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now and the National Hockey Now YouTube page. Please forgive my little bit of weekend voice. It was 70 in Winnipeg on Sunday. Hopped off the plane later that night, and it was 30 in Calgary. So getting a little bit of that cold weather beat up there. Plus, Edmonton is certainly no warmer than Calgary. The breaking news on Thursday. Penguins coach Mike Sullivan saying the team sent Tristan Jarry home to Pittsburgh instead of practice on Thursday. Jarry goes home to Pittsburgh to work privately with one of the goalie coaches. Ordinarily, you might say, okay, but there's a couple of layers that might raise your eyebrow to this. First of all, I'm not going to put it on the screen, but there were fake trade rumors spreading about the internet. One of the big rumor rags incorrectly linked a reporter to reporting trade talks involving Jarry. It was garbage. They took it out of context. The same thing they did to me a couple of times over the summer. I got sucked in on Twitter, unfortunately. I had to pull it all back and say, hey, it was one of those nonsense things. So heretofore, Thursday evening, there are no credible Tristan Jarry trade talks. Now, what there is quite a bit of intrigue. Because, there's the story. Sullivan saying to a reporter, and I don't know who asked him, very quick follow-up, and it was very good follow-up. Was this planned? Sullivan sort of grimaced a little bit and said, yes. Okay, I would have advised the Penguins organization to get ahead of this story. When Sullivan was asked before the road trip about the goalie situation, are they going to take 3 goalies on the road? The answer should have been yes. And in those few days between Calgary and Edmonton, Tristan's going to come home to keep working so he doesn't atrophy on the road and, sitting in the press box. That would have been, the ideal way to handle it rather than kind of the bombshell on Thursday. Because, look, this was the tandem at the start of the year. Jarry, Nedeljkovic. Start of training camp, start of preseason, until Nedeljkovic's injury, obviously. However, Tristan Jarry has a bad first night, gives up they were point-blank chances against the Rangers in the very first game of the season, but there were still a couple of stoppable shots that leaked through him. He didn't get pulled in game 1 because the Penguins had a game the second night in Detroit. So Sullivan saved Joel Blomqvist for Detroit. Blomqvist plays, on his head. Penguins win. Blomqvist keeps the net. The next time Jarry gets in is a week ago in Buffalo. Again, 3 goals in the first 11 minutes and 33 seconds. This time Sullivan does pull Tristan Jarry. And let's just kind of maybe cut to the chase a little bit. Conclusions. Tristan Jarry really isn't tradable unless it's for an equally undesirable contract. I know a lot of you are well-meaning, but hear me now, believe me later, that Tristan Jarry doesn't have any trade value. With this season included, he's got 4 more years at a $5.375 million cap hit. There are some goalie poor teams out there, but no team is going to take on what is essentially a $20 million gamble without unloading significant salary. The Penguins cannot eat part of Tristan Jarry's salary because they've already maxed out their 3 3 contract holdbacks. So that's where they stand with, the basic inability to trade Tristan Jarry. There's also the waivers thing, and it seems like we're on a collision course for him going through waivers. This is beginning to mirror former Edmonton Oilers goalie Jack Campbell, who was eventually sent down after a couple or a few months of struggling following a season in which he struggled. Let's put it all into context for Tristan Jarry. Didn't play the last 13 and a half games last season. Since then, in the 7 games since then, he's only had 1 start. And the Penguins give Mike Sullivan credit. He hasn't cracked one bit Every time he's asked about Jarry, it's about helping him to recapture. Sportsnet's Gene Principe, kind of a prince among men, one of the great Canadian reporters here in Edmonton, had an interesting question for Sullivan. And let me put Jarry back up there so you're not staring at me and that fake backdrop of the Edmonton arena. I am in my hotel room. You don't need to see all of that. I found a white wall and we put that behind me. Gene asked Sullivan kind of, what does the support mean? How is Tristan receiving, the support and the faith the organization is giving to him? The direct implication is, is Tristan grateful you haven't just tossed him to the curb yet, and the Penguins are working towards a solution. And by the way, that solution is getting Jarry back to his optimum game. This was the guy who at midseason last year was at a .917, .919 save percentage. He can be a pretty good NHL goalie for a long stretch of time. Kind of the fan dumping and pile-on notwithstanding, this guy has had success in the NHL. Maybe not in the playoffs like you'd want, but he has had success in the regular season. He's sort of worn down later. Cutting back to the point, Sullivan said, no, it's not a matter of supporting him, personally. It's our obligation to get him back. And I thought that was an important distinction. Like, they're not just doing this to be nice to Jarry. The Penguins have a lot of money invested. That aforementioned $20 million, and a player who can be an asset for them. They're trying to salvage this situation. Now, there are some additional layers to this sending him home. Edmonton is his kind of hockey home. This is where he played junior hockey with the Oil Kings. So it's always a little bit of a special and emotional time when you come back to where you played junior hockey. For the few guys who played juniors in an NHL barn, this is, it's kind of a big deal, right? It's kind of like homecoming, going back to college. Two, Jarry is from Vancouver. So after Edmonton on Friday, the Penguins go straight to Vancouver, Jarry's hometown. So they've sent him home instead of I don't necessarily understand why they couldn't get him the work here on the road, but that was the decision regardless. Now, here's another interesting caveat to this Tristan Jarry thing. What happens if Alex Nedeljkovic, in fact, gets injured on Friday against Edmonton? Or Blomqvist, whoever starts Friday against Edmonton, because the Penguins have back-to-back games. The insurance policy was already here. The insurance policy who would back up on Saturday in Vancouver. So I don't know what to tell you, really. This situation is odd. My conclusion is that we are headed towards waivers. Sullivan and Jarry have some fence mending to do. Clearly, Jarry has lost Sullivan's confidence. I think that, Sullivan will never say it. Maybe Jarry would down the line, but Jarry isn't necessarily the media-friendly goalie that he was several years ago. So I don't necessarily expect him to, pop off or deliver some, inside dish as well. So they've said, I had written a few days ago, the Penguins are trying not to embarrass him. And Sullivan's words to this point have indeed followed that mission, but this action sort of does that. And I know Sullivan is trying to tamp it down. He said it, in Calgary, is this going to be a question every day? Well, yes. Kyle Dubas on his Sportsnet show with Josh Getzoff really heavily implied that when the time is right, that Yoel Blomqvist would be sent back to Wilkes-Barre Scranton. It seems now that we are getting further and further from that time in which Yoel would be sent down. Bear in mind, it takes about 100 NHL games for a goalie to stop being a lump of Play-Doh and become sort of their fully formed self. And Yoel Blomqvist is all of 3 games into his career. So don't get, don't assume that Blomqvist is as good as you want to transfer onto him for being a top prospect. There's a lot of ups and downs, trials and tribulations yet to go with him. Alex Nedeljkovic. Let's not compare Nedeljkovic to Igor Shesterkin. I don't mean that in a negative way. Nedeljkovic is a solid NHL goalie. He really has improved over the last couple of years. In fact, here, I'll put Ned back there so you're not looking at me anymore. But is Nedeljkovic a 55, 60 game goalie who's going to carry his team? That's really not him either. He's a really good tandem goalie. I'm confident saying that. He's an excellent backup goalie. I'm confident saying that. Beyond that, I don't think anybody knows quite where he fits. So there is some inherent risk, and there is plenty of motivation. Okay? There's plenty of motivation for the Penguins to salvage this. It is their responsibility to get Jarry back to optimal performance, because you don't know what you have with the 2 other goalies being mainstays. One being, a 1A and a backup, you kind of know what you have. But 2 of them in a season when you're trying to end a 2-year playoff drought, well, that gets interesting. So I would have advised the Penguins to have announced this before it happened, not after. And I would have certainly, it's probably where I'll stop it. I think we all have raised an eyebrow, but there are no credible trade rumors to this point. But we are heading to kind of that waiver wire showdown by Thanksgiving, a month from now. Seems like that's just about when, if this continues, that's, I think, when you would see it. But injuries could also accelerate that timeline as the Penguins play more games, a few more road trips coming up here. In a couple of weeks, we go through Long Island, Carolina, DC. Talk about 2 of my least favorite places, Long Island to Carolina. Carolina's lovely people. It's just the arena's out in the middle of nowhere. So you have to rent a car, you have to drive back, and anyway, I'm whining. And I think my feelings on Long Island are legendary. So I won't get back into those. That's everything. For everybody who wanted Jarry on waivers, the clock is certainly ticking. As much as Sullivan and Dubas want to suppress the story, certainly Thursday's actions poured gasoline all over it. What happens next? I don't know either. I'm watching with the rest of you. So follow me on Twitter at the Dan Kingerski. Check us out on PittsburghHockeyNow.com. We've got a couple or a few stories. I literally was standing in the media scrum when Sullivan said this. And knowing that we had to go back into the locker room to talk to the players, I quietly texted Shelly Anderson. Shelly, write the story really quickly. Penguins sent Jarry home. And literally before we were in the locker room, I uploaded the video of Sullivan talking to YouTube. The magic of technology, she was able to write the story for me so that we had it first up. I don't know why that's a big deal, but it kind of is in our industry. All right. I appreciate you following along. Like, subscribe, and keep those comments coming, and certainly here and on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. All right. We'll take care, and we'll talk soon.